That sentence alone should make you uncomfortable, because deep down you already know it's true. Most lives are not ruined by lack of talent, lack of intelligence, or lack of opportunity. They are ruined quietly, slowly, by moments, a bad mood, a surge of anger, a wave of fear, a craving for comfort, a desire to escape pain right now, even if it costs everything later. This is not weakness of character. This is a lack of mastery. And Stoicism exists for one reason: to teach you how to rule yourself before your emotions rule your fate. Every permanent goal demands consistency, not motivation, not inspiration, consistency. And consistency is impossible if you allow every feeling to vote on your actions. If you wake up tired and decide your discipline can wait, if you feel offended and decide to burn bridges, if you feel bored and abandon the work that would have changed your life. Temporary emotions are not advisors. They are weather, and yet most people build their lives according to the weather instead of the destination. The Stoics understood something brutal but liberating. Feelings are automatic, but actions are a choice. You cannot stop a feeling from arising, but you can stop it from becoming a decision. Anger appears, fear appears, doubt appears, but none of these should be handed the steering wheel. When you let emotions drive, your life becomes reactive instead of intentional. You stop living by principle and start living by impulse. And impulse always demands payment with interest. Think about how many times people sabotage years of effort in a single emotional moment. One argument ruins a relationship. One night of indulgence destroys months of progress. One impulsive decision wipes out a reputation that took decades to build. This is not tragedy. This is mismanagement of the inner world. The Stoic does not suppress emotion. He observes it, names it, and refuses to obey it blindly. He understands that emotions are short-lived, but consequences are not. Temporary feelings are loud. Permanent goals are quiet. That is why discipline feels boring and temptation feels urgent. That is why excuses sound convincing in the moment and ridiculous in hindsight. The mind under emotion becomes a skilled liar. It tells you stories like, "You deserve a break. Just this once. You'll start again tomorrow. This isn't the right time." And the dangerous part is not that these thoughts appear, it's that you believe them. A Stoic trains himself to pause between stimulus and response. That pause is where power lives, not in brute force, not in willpower theatrics, but in the ability to delay reaction. When insulted, he does not rush to defend his ego. When frustrated, he does not abandon his mission. When tired, he does not negotiate with his standards. He understands that feelings pass, but character is built in the moments when you act against them. Ask yourself honestly, how many of your setbacks were caused by external forces, and how many were caused by internal surrender? Most people blame circumstances because it's easier than admitting they betrayed their own long-term vision for short-term relief. The Stoic does not sugarcoat this. He accepts responsibility without drama. He understands that self-control is not about denying pleasure forever, but about refusing to sacrifice tomorrow for today. There is a deep difference between rest and escape, between recovery and avoidance, between compassion for yourself and indulgence that weakens you. Temporary feelings demand immediate satisfaction. Permanent goals demand patience, and patience is not passive. It is active endurance. It is showing up when enthusiasm is gone. It is staying calm when provoked. It is continuing the work when nobody is watching and nothing feels rewarding yet. The Stoics warned about living as a slave to passion, not because passion is evil, but because it is unstable. What feels right today may feel wrong tomorrow. If your actions depend on how you feel, then your values change every hour. And a life without fixed values is easily manipulated by others and by your own impulses. The disciplined mind chooses principles over moods, direction over comfort, meaning over momentary relief. This is why emotional discipline is the foundation of Stoic strength. Not the absence of feeling, but the refusal to let feeling dictate behavior. You can feel fear and still act with courage. You can feel anger and still choose restraint. You can feel sadness and still move forward. Emotional mastery does not make you cold, it makes you free. Free from regret, free from self-betrayal, free from waking up years later realizing you traded your future for temporary comfort. Look closely at the people who achieve lasting success, not just financial success, but inner stability, respect, and peace. They are not emotionally numb. They are emotionally trained. They do not ask, "What do I feel like doing?" They ask, "What must be done?" And then they do it, calmly, repeatedly, without drama. This is not glamour. This is greatness built quietly. If your goals truly matter, they must outrank your moods. That is the rule. Not sometimes, always. Your emotions are allowed to exist, but they are not allowed to command. Because the moment you let temporary feelings take control, you begin dismantling the very future you claim to want. And that destruction rarely feels dramatic. It feels comfortable, reasonable, justified, until it's too late. In the next part, you will learn how the Stoics trained this inner discipline daily, how they prepared for emotional storms before they arrived, and how you can build a mind that remains steady no matter what you feel in the moment. If you want permanent goals, you must prepare for temporary storms. The Stoics never waited for emotions to appear before deciding how to act. They trained in advance. They rehearsed difficulty before it arrived. Because when emotion is high, reason is weak unless it has been trained. Most people try to be strong in the moment. The Stoic build systems so strength is no longer optional, but automatic. The first discipline is anticipation. The Stoics called it premeditation of adversity, not pessimism, preparation. They assumed that frustration would come, that insults would happen, that motivation would fade, that boredom, fear, and anger would show up uninvited. Because when you expect emotional difficulty, you are less surprised by it, and what does not surprise you has less power over you. When you are not prepared, emotions feel personal, overwhelming, urgent. When you are prepared, they feel familiar, like a storm you've seen before. You don't panic, you don't argue with the sky, you adjust your posture and keep walking. This is emotional maturity, understanding that feelings are events, not commands. The second discipline is separation. The Stoic separates what he feels from what he does. He does not confuse emotion with identity. Feeling angry does not mean I am anger. Feeling afraid does not mean I must retreat. Feeling unmotivated does not mean I should stop. He speaks to himself with clarity. This is a feeling, not a verdict. And that single distinction prevents countless mistakes. Most people collapse the distance between feeling and action. They feel tired and quit. They feel offended and attack. They feel pleasure and overindulge. The Stoic inserts distance, a pause, a breath, a question. Is this aligned with my principles? And if the answer is no, the feeling is ignored, not suppressed, but overruled. This leads to the third discipline, rules over moods. Stoics live by rules because rules do not change with the weather of the mind. A rule might be simple. I do not make decisions when angry. Or, I train even when I don't feel like it. Or, I don't sacrifice tomorrow for relief today. These rules remove negotiation, and where there is no negotiation, there is no self-betrayal. Negotiation is where discipline dies. The moment you start debating with your emotions, you've already lost. Feelings are persuasive. They know your weaknesses. They speak in urgency. Rules are quiet but firm. They don't argue. They simply stand. And over time, your mind learns something important. Emotions can complain, but they don't decide. The fourth discipline is voluntary discomfort. The Stoics intentionally practice discomfort to weaken the power of comfort-seeking emotions. Cold, hunger, simplicity, silence, not as punishment, but as training. When you willingly endure mild discomfort, you teach your nervous system that discomfort is survivable, that it is not an emergency, that you don't need to escape it immediately. This is critical because most destructive decisions are attempts to escape discomfort. Emotional eating, procrastination, outbursts, addiction, avoidance. When you fear discomfort, emotions control you. When you train with discomfort, emotions lose leverage. You realize, I can feel this and still function. And that realization changes everything. The fifth discipline is identity. The Stoic does not ask, what do I feel like doing? He asks, who am I becoming? Identity creates consistency when motivation disappears. If you see yourself as a disciplined person, you act disciplined, even when you don't feel like it. If you see yourself as someone who keeps promises to himself, you don't break them for temporary relief. Most people identify with their emotions. I'm just not motivated. I'm an anxious person. I'm easily frustrated. The Stoic rejects this language. He does not define himself by transient states. He defines himself by chosen values, and values do not fluctuate with mood. The sixth discipline is consequence awareness. The Stoic trains himself to see the long-term outcome of short-term indulgence. He asks, if I obey this feeling, where does it lead? Not just today, but in a year, in 5 years, in a lifetime. This future-oriented thinking dissolves temptation, because many desires lose their appeal when you see their full cost. Temporary feelings promise relief. They never mention the price. The Stoic reads the fine print. He understands that every emotional shortcut delays progress, weakens character, and builds regret. And regret is far more painful than discipline ever was. Finally, the seventh discipline is repetition. Emotional mastery is not a breakthrough, it is a practice. You don't become immune to feelings. You become faster at recognizing them, faster at pausing, faster at choosing principle over impulse. Every time you act correctly, despite feeling wrong, you reinforce the neural pathway of self-command. This is why the Stoics emphasized daily practice, daily reflection, daily correction, not perfection, consistency. You will fail sometimes. You will slip. The Stoic does not collapse into shame. He analyzes, adjusts, and returns to the path, because quitting is itself an emotional reaction, and he refuses to let emotion have the final word. In the end, the message is simple but not easy. Your feelings are temporary, but your goals define your life. Every time you choose comfort over discipline, impulse over principle, emotion over reason, you cast a vote against your future self. And every time you act with restraint, patience, and clarity, despite how you feel, you become stronger, calmer, and more free. You don't need to feel ready. You don't need to feel confident. You don't need to feel motivated. You need to act correctly while feeling everything. That is Stoic power. That is how permanent goals survive temporary feelings. And that is how a person stops being ruled by the moment and starts ruling his life.